to welcome to the Partnership for National Unity press conference for April 10th, 2026. I am your moderator today, Ms. Shanika Hale. Joining today's press conference is Mr. Aubrey C. Norton, leader of the People's National Congress Reform and the Partnership for National Unity, Mr. Reyes Rutnarai, Member of Parliament to the APNU, and Mr. Retta Fernandez, Member of Parliament to the APNU. Today's press statement will be read in two parts, and we will begin with the reading by the leader.
APNU opinion on the U.S. ambassador's pronouncements on Guyana and a worry about the legitimate concerns of the Guyanese people. The APNU has taken note of the comments made by United States Ambassador Nicole Thériault on Sources program, where she said she believes the Ali administration has the Guyanese people's best interests at heart, praised the scale of infrastructure work across the country, defended the use of oil revenues for major projects, and argued that improved roads and connectivity will better the personal circumstances of the Guyanese people. Her Excellency forgets our own Secretary of State's view that the Heroes Highway was poorly built, and in describing it as, quote, concussion road, unquote. Nothing has changed since. We are aware that the ambassador must pursue her government's interests, and at present the U.S. interest is being promoted above Guyana's by the PPPC regime, and therefore she is happy with its present posture. The APNU wishes to remind the Irfan Ali regime that the U.S. does not have permanent friends, only permanent interests, and that Guyana needs to recognize this fact and act appropriately. The APNU wishes to note the reemergence of U.S. interests and involvement in the oil sector in Venezuela, and that this fact should influence our foreign policy. While we welcome the support of the U.S. government for the legitimate concerns of the Guyanese people, we find it unfortunate that the ambassador will appear to support a government that continually refuses to deliver voter biometrics and a clean voters list, fails to implement one of the recommendations for electoral reform as recommended by the international community, especially those recommended by the EU Election Observer Mission, all of which are critical to democracy in Guyana. Or has the U.S. abandoned its commitments to their democratic principles? We ask the question, has the U.S. government abandoned its desire to see the back of corruption by supporting a government categorized by reputable transparency and accountability international agencies as one of the most corrupt in the world? The latest global indices 2023 to 2025 noted on Guyana's effectiveness report that Guyana scores 40 and is ranked 87 out of 180 countries and is given a C grade on corruption. Is that a government that should be supported? The APNU has no doubt that the US has diplomatic panache and therefore respectfully submits that foreign diplomats should not appear to validate an incumbent administration in a way that brushes the legitimate concerns of the Guyanese people, especially at a time when the US government is fighting drugs and drug trafficking, and many previously and presently associated with the corrupt PPP regime are on the US security enforcement radar. We in the APNU state without fear of contradiction that the PPPC regime does not work in the interest of the people of Guyana. Our conclusion is based on the evidence of everyday life, the increase in poverty, the absence of public accountability, the infrequent convening of the National Assembly, and the paucity of positive national outcomes. The U.S. ambassador is reminded that the government of Guyana has diminished public accountability by changing the legislation governing the Public Accounts Committee, and therefore there is little or no scrutiny of public spending. Has the US government removed accountability as an essential element of good governance? We hope not. Yes, roads and bridges matter. Our manifesto speaks clearly of the importance and our plans on infrastructure. But government cannot continue to sell a theory of development in which physical infrastructure alone is proof of national progress. Albeit poorly done public infrastructure, while elevated levels of poverty persist in Guyana. The same week that the US ambassador was making her comments, Guyanese were dealing with serious flooding in Georgetown and surrounding communities. A government that cannot keep communities better protected ahead of the rainy season cannot simply ask the nation to admire concrete and asphalt. It will be remiss of the APNU if we do not remind the US ambassador that the US has publicly committed to upholding the rule of law. We wonder if the erosion of the rule of law in Guyana is off the US radar. The US must be aware of the extrajudicial killings by the Guyana police force and the unfulfilled commitment by the president to have these matters investigated. It is opposite to note here that the said global indices report, that in the global indices report on Guyana, Guyana's score is minus 0.3, is ranked 110 and given a C- grade as it relates to upholding the rule of law. The US must know that Guyana is currently ruled by an elected dictatorship that does not govern based on the rule of law. The PPPC cannot claim a coherent people-centered agenda when human development concerns are so acute. Local reporting this week pointed to 11 children missing in just 2 months, while UNICEF says Guyana Child's Protection System handled 4,069 violence-related cases involving children in 2024. These are not side issues. They go to the core of whether development is reaching families, protecting children, and strengthening social systems. The government also cannot escape scrutiny by pointing to the size of its budget. Budget 2026 totals Guyana $1.558 trillion, with Guyana $196.3 billion Guyana dollars earmarked for roads and bridges. Guyana 183.6 billion for education, and Guyana 166.1 billion for health. The issue is not only how much is being spent, but is also whether spending is coherent, accountable, and effective. If people still face flooding, social insecurity, weak protection systems, and uneven service delivery, then the administration has not earned sweeping praise with words that include moving in the right direction. Among the issues addressed by the ambassador was Guyana accepting third country deportees. This is something Guyana is unprepared for. And as a small developing state, the costs outweigh the benefits. We cannot properly take care of crime in Guyana, but are agreeing to accept foreign criminals. That is unacceptable. APNU notes the ambassador has raised the issue of negotiating taxation as affecting US companies in Guyana, and that is all right. We in the APNU appreciate the healthy relations Guyana enjoys with the United States and will keep those relations. However, we believe that our interests must also be promoted. In this regard, there should be negotiations for Guyana to get more benefits from oil in Guyana, and the US must be supportive of such actions. We also appreciate the democratic aspirations and sovereignty that we Guyanese enjoy in holding our government accountable to the desires of the people. Guyana's own human development position shows that the national task is still unfinished. The latest UN data places Guyana at rank 89 with a Human Development Index of 0.776 in 2023. That means The real work of development is still ahead of us. Stronger public institutions, safer communities, better protection for children, resilience to climate shocks, and measurable improvements in people's lives are still to be achieved. APNU therefore rejects any simplistic narrative that equates visible infrastructure with good governance. We reject the suggestion that criticism of the government is somehow short-sighted because we caution that, I quote, you can't eat a road, unquote. Guyanese understand the value of infrastructure. What they also understand is that roads do not substitute for a livable income, accountability, flood preparedness, child safety, social protection, competent government, and an absence of corruption. The Guyanese peoples always appreciate partners abroad who respect our internal democratic scrutiny, but question commentary that sounds like political certification for a regime that is incompetent, divisive, corrupt, and still has many transgressions against the people to answer. APNU is and will continue to advocate for cohesive development policies that will benefit the Guyanese people. APNU shall remain a principal party in engagement with all foreign ambassadors. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now have the next part being read by MP Fernandez.
Thank you. APNU calls for immediate national flood mitigation work program ahead of the May-June rains. A Partnership for National Unity, APNU, is deeply concerned by the recent flooding across Georgetown and surrounding coastal communities, and by a clear absence of the kind of visible, structured, and aggressive national work program that is necessary ahead of the usually extended May-June rainy season. It is widely reported that government activated a series of flood visits after heavy rainfall inundated Georgetown and nearby areas, while ministers were sent on the ground and the Attorney General himself conceded that some state agencies must accept responsibility for the flooding. The reality is that the entire government must be held responsible. The issue confronting the country is bigger than walkabouts by the PPP ministers for photo opportunities and after the fact explanations. It requires the government to show concern by developing and implementing the required plans. The solution is not a long boots parade when residents are inundated with floodwaters. This is a clear case of incompetence. The ministerial visits are the usual attempts to create the appearance of action when the city and its environs are flooded, causing citizens and businesses to lose millions of dollars and property. The questions Guyanese deserve answers are simple. Where is the pre-rainy season National Flood Prevention Program? Where is a structured and time-bound program for drainage maintenance, including the clearing of drains and canals to ensure efficient flow? Where is the plan for the maintenance and operations of cokers, sluices, and pumps, including their performance under peak conditions? What is the plan to ensure trench excavation, weed removal, garbage management, and coordination with local democratic organs in the most vulnerable communities? There is none. While the regular cleaning of drains and canal is necessary to support efficient drainage, it is only one component of an effective drainage system. From an engineering standpoint, the system must be capable of performing under high-intensity rainfall events, including 100-year storm conditions. Efficient drains are essential to ensure that runoff reaches pump stations in a timely manner and that the required hydraulic head is available for effective pump operation. Where bottlenecks exist, Engineered drains with required hydraulic capacity must be constructed so that the system can be rapidly flushed of flood waters. However, the more critical issue remains whether there is adequate discharge capacity at the outfall, particularly during high tide when sluices are closed and resilience shifts to pump. This raises an important question. What are the government's short and medium term measures to improve overall drainage capacity, including outfall capacity and pump capacity? When is the government going to deliver adequate subvention to municipalities and other elected local government agencies to bring an end to flooding? They are dictatorial and brazen by taking over streets in Georgetown while failing to maintain drainage and irrigation, which are under their control. The government's approach of visiting during and after floods is political optics. There is a need for a comprehensive flood reduction and prevention framework supported by proper preparation and execution. Such an approach must be grounded in sound engineering principles, including system performance under major rainfall events and the alignment between conveyance efficiency and discharge capacity. This government spent billions on drainage and irrigation, but does not deliver the service so desperately needed. The money spent on drainage and irrigation does not result in tangible benefit to the people of Guyana. Drainage and irrigation must become avenues for the PPP, their friends, avenues for the PPP, their friends, family, and favorite to enrich themselves at the expense of the Guyanese people. APNU believes that a government that serves and puts people first must already have launched a time-bound emergency work program for every flood-prone ward and village on the coast. It would not wait until streets and homes are flooded, businesses are severely affected, and families are forced into distress before acting. When the regime acts, it merely puts on a political show for ministers visiting flooded areas. The government's inaction, corruption, and incompetence are the reasons for the flooding. We reject the notion that the public must settle for reactive management when Guyana now has unprecedented resources at its disposal. Report shows that Guyana received $761 million in oil revenues in the first quarter of 2026 alone. The government continues to project an image of rapid development and transformation, while something as critical as managing drainage system, irrigation, infrastructure, and solid waste disposal is still a persistent problem. This government is not delivering goods and services to the people. It is enriching itself, its family, its friends, and its favorite. What makes this failure of preparedness even more troubling is that it exists alongside a record public spending and a development narrative dominated by poorly built highways, bridges, and other infrastructure projects. Budget 2026 allocates $196.1 billion for roads and bridges, part of a $1.558 trillion national budget. With the government presenting this as proof that the country is moving in the right direction, yet flooding in the capital and along the coast remains a recurrent threat. That contradiction goes to the heart of the problem. A development agenda without cohesion, prioritization, and human outcome is not national transformation. The budget fails to prioritize people over the money the PPP, its friends, family, and favorites can earn, rather than delivering goods and services to the people of Guyana. The real test of development is whether citizens are safer, healthier, better protected, and more secure in their communities. This is not the case in oil-rich Guyana. Public expenditure spent without a proper plan does not result in everyday human security or in the provision of a high quality of life for citizens. APNU therefore calls on the PPP regime to immediately present a clear and time-bound solid waste management plan and a flood mitigation and drainage work program with defined action for the upcoming May-June rainy period. This plan must identify targeted communities, specify works to be undertaken, name responsible agencies, define timelines, assign equipment, and establish reporting mechanisms for public accountability. The Guyanese people should not have to guess whether the state is prepared each time the rainy season comes. It is a matter of governance, competence, and priorities. Guyana does not lack money. What it lacks under the PPPC is coordination, execution, transparency in delivery, and a development agenda that places the lived condition of ordinary citizens at the center. Thank you.
At this time, the floor is open for questions on the press statement. Mr. Adam Harris?
Yes. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
I have two questions. One for Ms. Fernandez and the other for the government leader. Now, Ms. Fernandez, sometime back, Edgel blamed the state of drains and the garbage in the city on the PNC, claiming that it was clean under the PNC and now it's dirty. And it's a case of he who controls the dogs releases the dogs. That was his contention. Do you support that contention by Mr. Edgel that the PNC and its supporters are responsible for the mess we have in Georgetown, hence the blocked drains?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Harris. No, I don't. I reject that statement in totality. And what I would further say is that that is the PPP's way of basically admitting their incompetence. They have not been able to, or they have failed deliberately to put any proper system in place to mitigate the effect of the rains. So there they go, and they try to blame everyone else for their incompetence. We have time and time again spoken about the lack of any proper system, any flood mitigation program, and they are yet to deliver. That is willful. You do not have trillions of dollars passing through the national budget, hundreds of billions of dollars being placed towards drainage and irrigation, and fail as a government and then come to blame it on the citizens of the country. That is solely at the feet of the government.
May I add, Adam? Let's try and follow to its logical conclusion. I think he is trying to allow people to infer, or he's implying, that it is because it is our stronghold and it is our support base, people are deliberately making it untidy. But then you need to explain how Region 6 quarantine, where they won overwhelmingly, at least they allege, is flooding and flooding terribly. The APNU didn't control Springland, and it was flooded. Riverton was flooded. And if you run the whole gamut, you will recognize that it is widespread incompetence. And it has nothing to do with the APNU. In fact, when the APNU came to government in 2015, Georgetown was in a mess, and many other communities. And there was a nationwide cleanup campaign that brought Georgetown to a better place, and many other communities. So it's just a case of they're just singing for supper. It must be noted as well that they have turned DNI into a slush fund. It has no proper leadership. Money's just poured into it. And so one cannot expect that Drainage and Irrigation Department will deliver quality services because it is not properly managed. And this is deliberately so by the PPP so that it becomes a slush fund.
Mr. Harris, you said you had.
Sorry, yes, the second question, this one is for the common leader. Now, on social media, there is a report that the president is building a fantastic mansion. You've been talking about corruption. First of all, is it true that he's erecting a mansion? Where is this mansion being erected? And if, as he says, he has been declaring his assets to the Integrity Commission, is there an indication of the extent of his wealth before the Integrity Commission?
Look, I don't know. I saw the post that he's building a mansion. Well, it will be the second one because I think he lives in virtually one, which was bought at below, as I understand it, it is alleged that it was bought below market price. So it wouldn't be new if he's going in that direction. Now, I've always said that if you take these chaps and put their income against their assets, you will recognize that it can't stand scrutiny. And so I have no doubt that the Integrity Commission isn't going to do anything. In fact, for years, we refused to submit to the Integrity Commission because it doesn't come over as a legitimate organization that is pursuing accountability. It comes over as a body that goes through the formality, and if it suits the government, they put in the public domain the persons who didn't submit, while saying nothing about the contents of those that have submitted. And there's where the problem lies. The Integrity Commission doesn't challenge anything that emerges in the reports. And if they decide to do after I would have spoken today, I could bet you they will go after opposition forces rather than the government. So this whole thing about integrity is a charade. It's not serious. In which country a young man that was in 2006 virtually in poverty will arrive at the kind of assets that are now manifest, and it will be pure earnings from legitimate employment and businesses? I mean, the evidence is clear.
Thank you. The floor is still open for questions on the press statement. The floor is open for any other question.
Norton sir, could you say what is your perspective about the use of the Currently River, and how do you envisage this matter being resolved?
Well, I would say this. We are well aware that there's a dispute there. And I think the fundamental problem has been there isn't consistent engagement to resolve it. And unless there is consistent engagement and we put the historical facts and deal with it, it will not be dealt with easily. How it's going to be resolved, I don't know. What I can say is that Guyana has historical records that it can utilize and bolster its case, but at the same time, there has always been some form of cooperation between Guyana and Suriname that allowed our fishermen, etc., to utilize the river without controversy. Unfortunately, that appears to be no longer the case. And therefore, I would put the blame here, the government inability to do consistent diplomacy, not only with Suriname, but with Venezuela as well.
Do you believe that Guyanese businesses that are moving cargo such as wood and quarry products should pay Suriname for use of the river?
No, I don't. To the extent that it is still disputed and we have not have a kind of a final decision on it, I think the status quo or the status quo ante the present situation should be allowed to continue while Guyana and Suriname engage and make binding kind of decisions. Well, binding is not the best word. Consensus decision on the use of the Corentyne River.
The floor is still open.
A quick question.
Go ahead.
Governor, you spoke about the apparent support of the U.S. ambassador for Guyana, and you did highlight some facts. Did the party attempt to approach the ambassador to question her judgment? Because remember when Marco Rubio came and he talked about the party building that what he called Contortion Highway, there was an outcry. Has there been a similar outcry for this incident?
Well, I didn't follow it online, but I heard by reports that there was an outcry online. So, like I said, that is by report, so I can vouch for it. I do not believe that our approach should be really to engage the American ambassador at this stage, but to do just what we did, put the facts that point to a contrary position to the ambassador. Look, every ambassador serves the interests of their country. You notice I didn't use the word support that you used. I think the US is happy with what is happening in Guyana at the diplomatic level in terms of their control. And therefore, to the extent that they are comfortable with that, they seem prepared to overlook the key elements. And so we thought that we need to bring it to the attention of the ambassador that these are issues that you are looking at in other countries. And it appears a kind of a convenience that you are not looking at it in Guyana. The very report I referred to on the indices stated only one positive about Guyana, and that is growth, economic growth, which is not a function of government's management, it's a function of oil. And all the other social security, corruption, etc., they scored very low. And so what we're saying is the ambassador, as she pursues her government's interests, must use diplomatic panache to ensure that whatever is delivered in a balanced way, and more importantly, takes into consideration the legitimate concerns of the Guyanese. You can't tell me Guyana is going fine when we wake up, police executing young men. You can't tell me Guyana is going fine when we are considered one of the most corrupt countries in the world. You can't tell me Guyana is going fine when the infrastructure you are building is collapsing just behind completion. We just saw what happened in Kokwani with the so-called New Year's trip. So what we are pointing out is the danger of turning a blind eye to rule of law, democratic principles, corruption, illegality such as trafficking in drugs, among other things. And we think that is the approach that should be taken. But at some time when we meet the US, we will say to them our concern, but we put our concerns in the public domain because first and foremost to us is the Guyanese public.
Thank you. The floor is still open.
Yes, and perhaps we can talk about the acceptance of deportees from the US, the so-called third party, what do they call it? Third country people or something of the sort. Now, there has been talk about this, but is the party aware of a decision by the government to accept these people? And if so, what can be the reaction of the party should this become a reality?
All right, let me start by saying we oppose taking deportees, especially those with criminal records, and sending them to Guyana. We have no problem taking back Guyanese. They are born here, they're entitled to come here. But we have a serious problem when you decide against our interests that you are going to take deportees with a criminal record when we are having difficulty in Guyana dealing with crime. That doesn't sound sensible to me. When we look at the justice system, the government is touting reform, but no reforms are occurring. So there's an added danger that they might spend whatever time in the prison, and then when they come out, problems for us. Now, at the same time, we acknowledge that there is a human resource shortage. But I can tell you, I ran into 2 quality fitter machinists at an establishment on the East Coast. Skills that we need that we don't have from Cuba. But there is no program to ensure that we can have from migrants the skilled persons who we screen and regularize so that they contribute to the development of the human capital in Guyana. And so there are options that the government has, but they seem only willing to concede to the US whatever the US wants. That is dangerous because, and like I've said before, we are not anti-United States, we are pro-Guyanese. We believe our interests must come first. And it cannot be in our interests for us to take deportees from another country in Guyana. We have a housing shortage. We have shortages in our education system, in our health system. And you are bringing undesirables to put additional strain on our social system. Now, there's a cost to it. While the government is saying, the government has a stupid argument that if you give social benefits, it's going to push inflation, increase inflation, which is garbage. There are many countries in which there are these social benefits and they don't promote inflation. Scandinavia is a case in question. And in Guyana's own experience, when we gave that 70% increase while we were in government, there wasn't an increase in inflation. But you are arguing you can't give Guyanese because of inflation, but you are now bringing people who are going to be dependent on our services and a threat possibly to Guyana. So I think that it's unacceptable. What our reaction will be will come from our engagement with the people of Guyana.
Thank you. The floor is still open for like 2 other questions.
If I can add in the meantime,
No problem.
to what Mr. Norton was just talking about, and the fact that the government is not investing in the Guyanese human resource. And that is something that can be further highlighted with the data, even coming out of the labor force survey, the most recent labor force survey issued by the government of Guyana through the Bureau of Statistics there. That survey was taken for the fourth quarter of 2025. And if you're to go into that survey, you will see the real challenge that we have as a nation. We have of our working age population, over 40% of the persons in our working age population actually have less than or the majority of them therefore have up to primary school education. Some of them only have nursery school education, not having a secondary school education. That's what we're working with. So we can further even expand that conversation to speak about the Ministry of Labor, in which currently the Ministry of Labor's budget is an insult. When we had a Department of Labor under the APNU, they were given much more resources. We have a budget of $1.558 trillion with an entire ministry with a working budget of, I would say, less than $2 billion, sorry, if you were to go looking at that. We have a lot more to be done when it comes to training. The government has not integrated as yet our education system with the skills that are demanded for a developing country, for us to go in the direction we need to go. We've made this comparison and we've made these arguments several times when we talked about the gold scholarship in particular and how it is not done in a structured way. University of Guyana has been trying with the leadership that they were trying desperately. The government did not fund them as they had required funding and all of those things. We have serious challenges and the government is not putting any system in place to make sure that we get to that level. You cannot say that we're doing so many training. They love to go out there and talk about how many persons is graduating here and there. And when you look at the numbers that they are presenting from the Bureau of Statistics in the labor force survey, it tells a different story. It's saying that our country is in a serious need for upskilling of our working age population. When you have over 40% of that working age population only having up to a primary school level of qualification. So we're having serious issues. And as the APNU, our concern is, like Mr. Norton underscored, we are concerned with the welfare of Guyanese. And the PP administration seemed to be opting to take a position that they are going to take labor from elsewhere as opposed to upskilling Guyanese to make sure that we are the ones benefiting from the resources of this country. And that is not something that we can support.
It also points to what we said in the statement, that the government equates infrastructure with development. Whenever you talk to them about education, they tell you how many schools they build. Of course, that allows them to make money. But when it comes to the delivery of education, they say nothing about it. So you have a government that clearly has no interest in educational development. And as a consequence, you are producing a youth that is not equipped to operate in a modern society. If you look at what is happening to our young people, you will see a clear absence of training, not only in the technical field, but the social skills that are needed to perform in a modern society. In that regard, the government is a complete failure. A complete failure.
I would just like to add or go back into the rear view a little bit as it relates to the press statement. where a number of things were mentioned as it relates to flooding. And I strongly believe any sensible government would take the recent flooding, the recent situation that happened throughout the length and breadth of Guyana into consideration. I know there were a number of persons, as was said in the press statement, ministers and others, who are reactive and who went out after the flood actually happened to be able to assess and to do a number of things. That in itself is a waste of time and a waste of money. And I believe strongly with the advent of the May, June that coming up, government themselves has to put their house in order and to look at a general plan for that May, June period. And I would assume that a national task force, speaking of government, speaking to the municipalities, speaking of the city, speaking to the towns, speaking to the NDCs, ought to be put in place so that we could treat with these issues and not just having the administration of those councils part of that. They need to have the directors, the mayors, the deputies, the chairpersons, and all those other significant others to be part of that process so that we could flesh out a number of ideas and we could determine how we deal with these matters moving forward. This ad hoc and jerk approach to treating with matters of the state and the city and the municipalities is not one that should be condoned. And I think a lot more should be desired of the government themselves to be able to deal with these matters so that it could be a holistic one where it involves all stakeholders and having all hands on deck moving forward.
Look, the flooding issue is a very complex issue that the government needs to address. One of the things that worry me is everywhere I turn, the government is narrowing the drains to put road. I have no doubt that you can narrow drains if you have a proper drainage system. But in the absence of a proper drainage system in which water is flowing, narrowing drains is dangerous. Because if the water isn't flowing and you narrow it, when you have the high levels of rainfall, you're in trouble. And it comes over to me as if they are not guided by engineers. You know, as I speak with competent engineers, you gain the impression that there is no professional impact, or there's not the impact of professionals on what the government is doing. I pass Liliendal virtually every day once I drive the front road. And there's the pump station there. And when you do the basic reading on the material, you will see that if you have, and we mentioned in the press statement, if you have a pump, but you have bottles, all kind of things in the water, then it doesn't meet the pump in the way that it should. So even pumping becomes inefficient. And unfortunately, this government believes that just putting down a pump solves the problem. They don't focus on efficiency. They don't focus on effectiveness. They do not focus on creating a network of drains that are flowing out. We mentioned in the press statement, they do not even focus on what should happen, what needs to be done when the sluices, the cokers, etc. are closed. And so, really and truly, we are in shambles.
Thank you. With there being no.
Just a question.
Ms. Svetlana?
Just saw the, hi, good day, Svetlana Marshall, News Source. I saw the mayor present. Mr. Mayor, I understand that the city council moved to the court on Tuesday, filing an application of claim against the Attorney General and Rashid Khan. Could you just give us a bit on that legal submission? What is the council's main argument?
Well, the council's main argument on this matter addresses trespass and that government's trying to assume or take over that asset which is owned by the city mayor city council. So we've moved for injunctive relief to ask the court or pray to the court to ask them for them to grant us the necessary relief so that we could have back our property and so that we could be able to have access and be able to determine what is the best use for that property. So the injunctive relief in itself will be praying to the court to remove government from the property, remove the Roshan Khan person who is the security person, and to cause the Attorney General to back up on this matter, because this is property of the Mayor and City Council, and it will remain property of the Mayor and City Council.
So clarity, sir, are you asking for the injunction, with regards to the injunction for the state and Roshan Khan to be removed pending the outcome of the substantial matter?
Well, yes. Firstly, we'll have to get the injunctive relief. So when the injunctive relief is hopefully granted by the courts, taking into consideration the facts that was presented by our attorney in these matters, they could then look at how else they want to continue in the pursuit of dealing with this matter. But as it stands, the position is we are moving for injunctive relief to remove those persons that happen to be there and to gain back the access to our property. We don't want to get into any other tug of war and to have to deal with these matters. So we're asking the court to address it so that we can be able to allow good sense to prevail.
My final question on this issue, could you say if the council also moved to the court with respect to the municipal roads that were also seized and reclassified by the government?
Yeah, we're almost at the state of filing our action in relation to that matter. We've, like I've said, we had an extraordinary meeting of the council where we had a resolution passed, causing me as the mayor to be the claimant in this matter on behalf of the mayor and city council. So our attorneys have been looking at that matter and they've getting up the necessary facts and evidence to be able to proceed. At the end of the day, court matters are determined by facts and evidences that have to be provided, and we have provided the necessary information to those attorneys to be able to deal with those matters as it relates to our streets. There are a number of streets there that are owned by the mayor and city council based on urban planning and how municipal planning happened over the years under our colonial people as well as our predecessors, so to speak. So we have a number of transports available to us that speak to ownership of those assets, not ownership by some guessing, ownership by title. So we have transport and title for those streets, and we will need to have those kind of discussions. At the end of the day, we heard the Attorney General himself speaking about public interest and morality and a whole host of things here talking about. We are saying the properties are owned by us, the streets are owned by us, and that you can't just come under some act to be able to assume those streets or to convey those streets to you. It's a lawful matter, it's a legal matter, and it's also a constitutional matter, and we will have to deal with these issues. I'm guided by the attorneys on this matter, and hopefully within the shortest possible time, we will have those matters filed, and that we'll be seeking legal redress on these matters moving forward.
It should be added that it's a political matter as well. What the government is seeking to do, they recognize that there is no chance of them winning Georgetown. Every election shows clearly that the people of Georgetown reject the PPP. So I think they have given up on winning. And so they come with this strategy now to take away streets so that before you know it, the central government is in charge of the municipality. I believe under the law, it can and will be challenged because our constitution provides for local government. Our constitution outlines what areas of control local government bodies should exercise. I think the PPP is pushed by greed. They're pushed by domination and control. And the fact that they can't control a few municipalities, they don't care if they control 10. In their book, they are authoritarian, they are totalitarian, they are dictatorial. So they must control everything. You just have to see how they deal with PPP, people who left the PPP, how they crucify them historically and at present. And so we are dealing with a regime that is not prepared to create space for others. For them, it must be total control and domination by them. And there is no space for anyone else. And it has to be challenged and will be challenged.
Thank you, Mr. Antonio Day.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Mr. Mentor, pleasant good morning to you, sir. I just wanted to find out from you, can you provide at this point an update on how works on the Starbuck market are going thus far?
Well, in relation to the Starbuck market project, that comes with funding from central government, and that they have been working in consultation with us. They have identified to us areas that they have in mind, which is the front shed. There's also some roof areas and some valleys and a number of things that was part of the budgeted plans. And these are not budgeted items in the 2026 budget plans. This is budgeted plans for monies from the 2025 budget that flows over into 2026. And because those works was only started November, December of 2025, and they are now flowing over to 2026, where the 2026 plans and the allocations are not yet, I guess, treated with so that they could hand over to the various contractors. But those jobs are going fine as it relates to the canopy to the front and also to the valleys, and some areas down to the back where they would be overtapping based on when you have high tide. So there are a number of things that are being done, and those are done in conjunction with our engineers, in conjunction with the government engineers, so that it can be done in a collaborative way and a best suit for everyone.
So, because given that we had a lot of heavy rainfall, which would have posed a lot of delays on other projects across the country, just wanted to find out if everything is going as smooth as what is being seen.
It is going as smooth as possible, and I'm guided by reports because I'm part of a WhatsApp group that they keep myself and the other people in the administration in the loop, and I report these matters to the full council as we meet from time to time.
Okay, given that we're on the topic of projects, can you say if there has been consensus regarding Yips Bakery? Because I know that the person he given the authority to vend there, because I spoke with him a while back and he said that he does not have a problem with them vending there. So I just wanted to know if the Mayor City Council has come to agreement that the vendors can vend there until there's an alternative location for these individuals.
Well, we've already identified a location where we'll be moving those persons to. We have at the point of designs, where we're designing a suitable place on the Merriman's Mall to relocate those persons. We are working with one of our private partners to have a public-private arrangement as it relates to how we'll be able to develop that space between Orange Walk and Cummins Street. Outside of that, the conversation that we've had with Yips, the fact of the matter, Yips, as well as the other beneficiaries of that property, have had certain conflicts, and those conflicts have flowed over into the legal realm, and that at the end of the day, they are trying their best to resolve those issues among themselves. But what has happened here is that the vendors themselves would have gotten entangled in that situation because one beneficiary was trying to move all the vendors as against one other beneficiary who was trying to keep them. So where we at on this matter is that the matter was dismissed at the level of the court, and the person who would have brought the action would have to refile and move for other proceedings in relation to this matter. As we speak, I don't see any application by them as it relates to refiling. So that matter in itself should be considered dead until there may be some other action that comes. But we are moving full speed ahead on the Melrose Mall with our designs and everything else. And it's only a matter of going through with our budget, which we intend to happen very shortly. And then we'll be able to allocate our part of the funds towards that project. The investor will allocate their part, and we'll be moving ahead with that development on the Melrose Mall.
Okay, so the government does not have a hand financially in this, because I know sometimes the government tries to throw their lot as much as they can, although they try to stifle the council.
Well, listen, I have heard of government and their involvement. I know of government's interest in East Ruimveldt, where they have the East Ruimveldt market, where they allocated $45 million last year, and the money was spent out in some other area, but it wasn't spent on the East Ruimveldt market. We know they've also catered for some $50 million this year. I believe they're in some design things. We also, as a council, will be spending some monies on that market, and we'll also be spending some monies on our East Ruimveldt playground and daycare center, where there's also plans to have a pavilion and have a number of other things there for other events. That ground in itself is one of our grounds, and we want to ensure that we stand by that position. We stand with the people in the community, because when government get involved with these things, you will hear who could access the ground and who can't access the ground. We don't want that kind of situation, and we'll ensure that we protect and stand with the people of that community to ensure that that kind of situation happen. But all in all, the overall plans by the city is to be able to deal with a number of matters, allocate those funds as we budget for them, and to do whatever best we could do within the various communities of the city of Georgetown.
We also have to note a trend. In fact, I've said to those at Mackenzie Sports Club, and I think we have engaged them and have the lawyers preparing, but I grew up in Linden knowing Mackenzie Sports Club to be our club, Linden Club. Out of the blues, the government suddenly decides that it is theirs and they are taking it. When they take it, it means right away you are denied access. And unless you're doing something that is in supporting them, you're not going to get access. They're trying to do the same thing now with East Ruimveldt. And the people in East Ruimveldt must know that when the government gets involved in those kinds of things, what happens? Now, at the sports and culture level, there's a dangerous movement in this country. And that is domination and control of areas that should be independent of government. I sense Hits and Jams and Kashif and Shanghai must be unhappy that they support the PPP, because the government has virtually taken over entertainment in a way that it affects private sector entertainment. A lot of the things that used to be done by private entrepreneurs in the sports and culture realm are now basically controlled by the government to promote one Guyana, when in fact they got more than one Guyana as far as the government is concerned. So this is a trend we have to look at and find ways and means of stemming it. This domination of and control of sports and culture.
Thank you. I see the hand of Mr. Dennis Sherrod.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, can you say what's your reaction to the position being taken by the local government minister that the former trading complex is the property of the state dating back to colonial times?
My thing and my view on this is that one who alleges must also prove. If you're saying that it's yours, provide the title. What we are saying is that it's ours and is the property of the mayor and city council, and we have provided whatever title towards this property, and that is what will be the contention. So our attorneys will be relying on such evidence, relying on such facts to be able to provide that evidence to the court and to erase any doubts as it relates to who owns the property and who it concerns.
Thank you. All right, with there being no other
And
questions.
Shanika, I just want to just give one
Go ahead.
correction. I did quote about the Guyana Labor Force Survey earlier, and that I just want to correct. I did say it was the fourth quarter of 2025. It is actually the fourth quarter of 2024 is their most recent report. So just for that clarification.
Thank you. All right, with there being no other questions, I want to thank the media personnel for joining today's press conference, and of course, our viewing audience. And we do hope you have a